So great to have you here, Tyler. I hope the Spanish-speaking audience can get to know you better. It's like that's the purpose of this interview. I believe it could be very beneficial. Your information, as for me, has been so nice and so useful, and we hope it reaches a lot of people here in Latin America and Spain and all Spanish-speaking audience.
Oh wow. Well, it's really awesome to hear that, and I love the information. It's definitely not mine. I can't claim it as my own because it comes through myself while I'm in the channeling state. And honestly, it mirrors information that so many other messengers have brought through before. I mean, it mirrors information we've heard from world religions, from philosophies, from other channeled beings. And the way I look at it as like is that the information itself is sort of this eternal consciousness that represents our own collective higher self, and different people can tune into that, right?
Yeah.
We can understand what that feels like, and then through combining that feeling with the voice, we can start to translate that energy as words, as language, as concepts. And that's really all I'm doing. I'm tuning my frequency to a level of my own consciousness that I perceive to be at the soul level, and then different selves that are a match for that soul personality, that soul consciousness, will then come through as the deliverers of that information. And that's why I think so many different channels will say similar things, because we're all really talking about the underlying nature of reality. I'm very honored to be able to be one of many who delivers this information, because it's very crucial, and it's very important for our times.
Yes, I know. And I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I think the message is the same. I mean, all the channelers I've listened to lately are saying the same things, but the way that Sassani communicate things is very fun. It's very humorous and very clear, very like intense. It's like very strong the way they communicate the message. So it's very easy to understand them. So I
Oh
love
yeah.
to hear Riok and Bashar, because I mean, I don't get bored of hearing them. It's always discovering new things. So hopefully other people can understand this information and benefit from it.
Yeah, that's my hope too, and it seems to be the case. I mean, I have people that are desiring sessions every day with me, and I love it because this is my career, and it's also one of my favorite things to do, because I look at it like the universe is at a point now where it's handing out the answers to the test. Right?
Yeah.
It's just giving us the answers. It's like, okay, enough of you have asked and enough of you are open to the information. So now we're just going to give all of it out, right?
Yeah.
It's like all of the secrets. And when I say secret, I just mean that which wasn't obvious is all just coming up now for us to see. And thankfully, right, with this information, in my opinion, it really is the answers to the test of life. It's
Yes.
like, okay, like treat people with love, live with integrity, be your best self. And like this is like how you can do that, because it's one thing to hear these phrases and it's like, okay, I know that, but it's like, how do I do that? And like, how does that benefit me, or how does that benefit anyone? What's the point of doing that? And these beings give those answers, and I find that to be of great service, because it helps us to see a bigger picture, because we're here on earth, on the ground, and there's only so much we can be aware of. But these beings, right, they're in a higher dimension, so they're able to look into this reality, and
Yeah.
they can tell us how everything's working and how we're creating it and how we can create it in a way that really is in alignment with our highest passion and our joy and the energy that makes us up.
Yes, it is a big gift to have this information now. And I think we're ready. I think I mean, humanity is ready to receive it. That's why it's here.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So I'd love to, why don't you talk about a little bit about you, Tyler Ellison? How did you start your spiritual path? And how did you get to this point where you began to channel?
Wow, great question. So, um, I feel like my spiritual path started at a young age through essentially indoctrination into religion, right? I mean, I was brought up in a Catholic sort of household where in the family line that was like really, a big deal, right? The church and having the spiritual connection. Um, and I was off the bat really drawn to not so much the culture of the religion, but the hidden reality that the religion was pointing to. Like, right, what is hell like? What is heaven like? What are angelic beings? What does God look like? Like, what are these things? I was very much fascinated with the aspects of the religion that I couldn't see. And even as a young kid, I had this like desire just to like read like the whole Bible. Like I was like, I want to know what this is. And I mean, I was looking at it from like a very like innocent perspective, right? I just, I was taught that this book is like the knowledge and the secrets of God and the universe. So I like, wanted to explore that. And it wasn't that I was, super into Catholicism, but I was super hungry from a young age to understand the occult world and to understand the hidden world and the subtle world. And that was like where I first felt that desire from like a young age. And then that started to blossom into other areas of exploration. I started getting very into, at a young age, probably around 12, things like magic. I got really into the idea of the Harry Potter book series and the idea of using magic to interact with other beings in other dimensions and to shift reality. And I was so into that. And that to me became something where at a young age, I was like, this is real. And my parents would try to talk me out of it. They'd be like, Tyler, this is a book. And I'm like, parents, I can feel it. This is like some real stuff that's being talked about here. And fast forward, I grew up a little bit more and let go of a lot of that as I went into my teenage years. And I just felt very dissatisfied with life. So I started experimenting essentially with using different compounds, right, to alter my consciousness, to maintain and discover that connection that I felt when I was young. Like I felt as I got older, I got more bitter. I was less of myself. So I started taking like chemicals and plants to see if I could open myself back up to that dimension. And that didn't really work too well. I mean, it opened some stuff up, but it was coming from this place of hurt and emptiness. So it didn't really do that, but it eventually led me to people who were exploring spirituality very deeply. They were into crystals, they were into yoga. And when I found those tools of spirituality, which resonated with me much more strongly than religion, that was when I felt like I had really found something of intense value. So I just started exploring that. I started meditating. I started doing breathing exercises. I started playing with crystals. And then that just kept building and building. And then eventually, Bashar, channeled by Daryl Anka, just crash landed into my reality. And I remember listening to Bashar speaking, and I was like instantly like laser beamed into that reality. And I was like, I can only listen right now to what this person's saying. I was like, it was like someone grabbed my brain and was like, hey, this is really important. We would love for you to pay attention to this. So I just started paying attention and receiving the teachings that Bashar and the Sassani were bringing through. And I sort of was like, just how there's football fans that are like sort of fans on the sidelines that are like, oh, that was a good play. That was a good thing. I was kind of like sideline spirituality, right? I was like doing practices and all that, but I wasn't really applying it to my life. I was still being like this crazy kid, this crazy party animal kid. I wasn't really doing it. I was like doing practices, but I wasn't living it. And at a certain point, I started applying the information Bashar was bringing through. And as soon as I applied it, everything in my reality changed, like dramatically. I moved locations. My old friends fell away. I had manifested a scenario where I could devote all of my time to professional spiritual practice for healing and for channeling and all of that. And I mean, that was essentially my journey into spirituality in a very condensed form of it. Yeah.
Very nice pathway. And I'm very glad you got to Bashar.
Yeah, me too. Me too. He's a master, and he's one of the best teachers I've encountered, and I find he's one of the most accessible, and that was, I think, really what helped me to take leaps and bounds in my evolution really quickly.
Yes. And how did you get to channel after that?
So when I moved to Connecticut, I pretty much was sharing with someone a Bashar teaching, and while I was sharing the teaching, I felt like Bashar, and I was like speaking like Bashar, and I felt very outside of myself, very outside of my Tyler personality. And that's when I was like, okay, whatever just happened there was very different than how I feel in my day. Right? That moment of delivering this information was very different. Different state of mind, different flow, different feeling. And that was when I realized I was tuning into that channeling state to deliver these messages, because these messages come from a channeled state. So to deliver them, I was accessing it. And then I started to pursue it. I started to practice channeling. I listened to a lot of recordings that teachers had given on how to channel. I started practicing and practicing. And I had a lot of success. Like early on, I had a lot of success with channeling, where I was like, all right, I'm going to channel Pleiadians today, you know? And I made this symbol that someone had channeled through that was like a Pleiadian contact symbol. And I used this symbol to connect to Pleiadian beings. And then a legitimate Pleiadian collective came through. They gave their name and everything. And after they came through, I Googled them, and there were other people channeling them, and I had never heard of them before. So right off the bat, I was having a lot of success with this. And you know, it's just been really unfolding ever since. I just practice. You know, I just practice as much as I can, at least once a week. You know, at least once a week I'm doing a channeling. But these days, I'm probably doing like six channelings a week. You know,
Wow.
sometimes more. And I do a lot to make sure I can do that. You know, because there's a lot of high energy there, and it's like with all the energy, it's like it doesn't just impact the person who I'm channeling for, it also impacts me. So I find I also have to make sure my own evolution keeps up with that energy.
Right.
So I do a lot of energy exercises, energy techniques, qigong. I do a lot of practices to help keep all that energy flowing and to help my consciousness adapt to all of the stuff that's coming through, so I can stay on my own leading edge as I'm best able to.
Great. And to what I understand, you channel mainly Riok, which is this entity, Sassani entity. It is your future self, right?
He's one of them. So this is how Riok has explained himself to me. Riok is a collective consciousness that makes up, or is made up rather, of many of my different incarnations. And that collective consciousness expresses itself through that Sassani personality and that Sassani lifetime. So he is, in terms of how he presents himself, right, this Sassani future hybrid self. But in terms of what that consciousness is, it's a very massive collective consciousness that represents many of my incarnations. But it's like he's the spokesperson for that. He's sort of the voice or the front man for that aspect of my own soul. Which is why I say, right, I'm accessing the soul level of myself. Ryok's translating that collective consciousness that is the soul into his vibrations, which then come to me, and I translate as English.
That is so fun. I mean, well, if you are ready, Tyler, we could bring in Riok and ask him some questions.
Perfect. So I'll go into the channeling state, and then you'll have the remainder, right, to interact with Riok, or however you want to use the time. So
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Enjoy. We thank you so much for the co-creation of this interaction. It is our civilization's highest joy, passion, and ecstasy to be able to have these types of communions and conversations with you and members of your civilization. How are you doing, dear one?
Hi, Riok. It is so exciting to have you here. Thank you for this. I am very, very excited.
You are quite welcome, and we are excited to be here with you in this unique perspective of the now. How do you desire to proceed with us this day of your time?
Well, I'd like to begin asking you, why did you and many other ET races are communicating with us at this time?
We are, in that sense, a side effect of your own consciousness accelerating. As you raise your frequency, you become more aware of beings that have always been, so to say, here and now with you. It was simply a matter of you not being able to perceive us and other beings like us with your previous vibratory states. But as you raise your vibration, as you raise your frequency, you become more aware of that which has always been present, more of that which has always been there and around you, but simply imperceivable due to the frequency difference. So now that you are in greater resonance with our energy through your own evolution, we manifest as we do in ways that are relevant to you to act as forms of assistance in your own collective evolutionary process.
Yeah, and we thank you very much for your assistance. It's very, very beneficial for us humans.
Yes, as your assistance is to us in our collective evolution and our collective remembrance of our civilization's ancestry.
I'd like to ask you, to what I know in the past, there were cultures that did contact you guys, or not especially you, Sassani, but many ET races, as the Mayan culture, the Incas, the Native Americans. They were in contact with many other consciousness as you. And why did we stop having that contact?
Because of the idea of differences you created within your overall frequency that in many ways shifted you out of resonance with our collective energy. Yeah. So in that sense, your civilization chose to descend in vibration for a certain amount of time, thus allowing for all of you to more greatly understand the energetics of darkness, so you can and could in your own ways integrate that darkness, integrate that energy. You integrate energy through the idea of transforming the energy by applying unconditional love, joy, and appreciation to the energetics of that which you are integrating. That is how you integrate. So as a collective civilization, you all decided to lower your frequency, so you become more aware of some of those denser energies, some of those energies that relate to the idea of negativity, of that which you don't prefer, and in becoming more aware of that which you don't prefer, it allows for you to, in that sense, have an opportunity to wash those energies, to bathe those energies in the ocean of your love, in the ocean of your joy, thus allowing for you to transform them into higher frequency expressions of energy through the idea of you shifting to higher frequency versions of reality by choosing love, choosing positivity in the face of those challenges. And that translates as you then raising your collective frequency, which again has brought us to this point in space-time where you are now once again more greatly interacting with us. But it's not that we and other civilizations like us ever left you. It was simply that your collective species, your collective civilization, chose to lower its frequency for a collective process and challenge of very comprehensive transformation.
All right. And this time that we are going through this pandemic, why did we choose to experience this, and how can we overcome this?
By doing just what we have expressed. The idea of choosing your preferred state of being, choosing the idea of your signature frequency as the motivating underlying energy behind all actions that you take in your physical reality. By truly being yourselves in the face of this challenge, you transform the challenge. For what we have said in relationship to your collective decision to lower your frequency and how you have decided to transform that holds true for your collective challenge currently. It's the same process. It's the same thing. It's just taking on a new form, a new expression that you are all calling your coronavirus. But in general, it is in many ways an opportunity for you to observe these energies that you don't prefer. So you can say, all right, what actions can I take? What states of beings can I adorn that represent my highest preference? And once you take those positive actions, fueled by the positive state of being, it represents the idea of an integration of the energies that manifested the external phenomenon you call the coronavirus in the first place. So this process is not something that is happening to you, it's something that you are all collectively choosing. We compare it to the idea of weight training in exercise. You, in that sense, will manifest certain challenges, which in this analogy are represented as the weights. You then lift the weights using your power. Your power is your love. Your power is your joy. Your power is your true state. And as you, in that sense, utilize your power to lift these weights that you have chosen to lift, you become stronger and stronger and stronger as beings, growing you, expanding you, just as the muscle tissues, the muscle fibers grow and expand. As you apply your power, your love to the challenge, the same is true for your consciousness. Does that make some sense for you?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense.
Hey, all right.
What about emotions? Do you experience emotions the same way we do? And what role do emotions have for us humans?
They assist you in crystallizing the idea of the stories you are telling yourselves in a way that allow for the stories to be perceived as more real. So, in other words, you tell yourself certain stories that generate the idea of emotional states that reinforce the story to make it appear to be more real, to make it appear to be more solid. That is why in your movies and in your books, when an emotional state is elicited, that story that's being portrayed becomes more real, more impactful, yes? Mm-hmm. Your emotions are the same. They are, in that sense, done to, in many ways, assist you in embodying the reality experience that you are creating. You create your reality experience utilizing your definitions, which then generate a state of being that then inspire actions. And understand that it's this type of process that in many ways creates your experience of reality. The emotions are simply there to assist you in believing that the story is real, and are also there to demonstrate and reveal to you the polarity quality of the story. Is the story more negative or is the story more positive? And if the emotional states are more positive, that is reflecting the idea that you're utilizing a positive story to create your reality. If the emotional state is more negative, it is in that sense reflecting to you, you are using a negative story to create reality. Right. And that, in our opinion, our perspective, is the role, so to say, of emotions. We do not experience emotions in the same way. We allow for our emotions to flow free and uninhibited. We do not repress them. We do not avoid them. We do not deny them. We also do not choose emotions that do not reflect our true nature. So what you consider to be sadness or anger or annoyance or frustration, we do not choose these things because they reflect the idea of negative perspectives, of negative stories. We are not telling ourselves negative stories. We are not utilizing negative perspectives. Therefore, we have no, in that sense, need to experience the idea of negative emotional states. We tell ourselves stories that are based in the underlying nature of reality, which from our point of view is incredibly positive, is incredibly fun, is incredibly joyful, and that is how we then experience reality in a way that's based in the underlying nature of creation, which again, as an energy, is unconditional love. So our emotional states reflect the idea of that underlying nature. So we do experience emotions, but we experience them very differently than you do.
Great. I'd like to ask you about timelines.
All right.
You've explained that there are infinite amount of timelines for every human being.
Yes.
And we are jumping from one another.
Yes.
But what about the collective level? I mean, I understand this very well as an individual level, but a collective level, how do I influence the collective timelines, and how does the collective timelines influence my individual timeline?
Well, understand that it has no true influence over how you experience your life. You are your own influence. You are your own effect. You create your effect by creating the meaning that you impose upon the idea of your collective narrative. If it's a positive meaning, you will derive in that sense a positive effect, a positive influence. If it's a negative meaning, you will derive a negative effect, a negative influence. It's always in your hands. Now, understand that you can tune your frequency as an individual, as a being, to any reality that you can imagine. If you can imagine a reality and you can imagine the feeling associated with that reality, you can effectively channel that reality. And you channel it through the idea of whatever inspired actions you take while you are in the state of that reality you have tuned yourself to. That reality might be on your current timeline, maybe downline or upline, or it could be on an entirely different timeline. It's up to you. But you can tune your energy to whatever timeline you prefer. And in that sense, you are blending timelines. You are blending the timeline you perceive yourself to be on with the idea of the timeline you are, in that sense, tuning yourself to. And you create, so to say, a third timeline, a third perspective that you can then utilize to navigate your physical reality life. And that is one of the more advanced and powerful ways that you can create your reality from a conscious level. You're actually doing this more often than you realize, but it's simply unconscious. And you do this by imagining certain things, imagining that they are real, and then acting as if they are real. And many of you utilize this in ways that are positive and negative, but you do it unconsciously. So understand that you, in that sense, will take the energy of your present moment, and you can then tune that energy to the energies of another present moment, but from a different perspective, potentially a different timeline, thus creating a third perspective, a third timeline that's a blending of the two. And that is then how you can, so to say, shift timelines in a way that's relevant for you and for your collective experience. But even your collective experience is not one experience. For it also, too, in that sense, is doing exactly what we have just said. For all of the members of the collective are, in that sense, engaging consciously or unconsciously in the very process we have just mentioned. So it seems like one unchanging narrative is actually a narrative that is constantly changing, is constantly shifting, and is constantly branching into other expressions of itself.
Sure. So imagine, I mean, if we use our imagination, it's because we can jump. If we can imagine a certain timeline, it's because we can jump to that certain timeline, right? So
yes, you have
exists.
the ability in that sense to blend with that timeline, yes.
Great. Well, now I'd like to talk about pyramids.
All right.
Here in this continent, in the American continent, we have lots of pyramids.
All right. Yes.
Some of them are very mysterious. I'd like to know, what role does the pyramids have for this continent, Earth, for the world? And specifically, I'd like to ask you, there is one pyramid called Teotihuacan nearby Mexico City, and we don't know yet who really built it. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Understand that many of the pyramids that you experience in your North, Central, and Southern American countries, in that sense, are pyramids that were created by the indigenous people that have their design origins in what you understand to be Atlantean perspectives. So understand that Atlantis, as an empire which existed on your planet, spread out to many other islands, but also to mainlands. And during this spread out process, many of the Atlantean citizens and beings that migrated, in that sense, began to reproduce with the mainland indigenous populations and began to exchange, so to say, and share with these populations the ideas of different Atlantean customs and architectural designs. So that way, these mainland cultures could, in that sense, carry on the Atlantean legacies and energies in their own unique way, in a way that would allow for the Atlantean energies to spread and expand, but would also allow for the local mainland energies to also expand and grow as well. So many of the pyramidal structures you perceive worldwide are, in that sense, a result, not all of them, but many of them, are a result of the idea of Atlantean migrations to different areas and the idea of those energies and designs and perspectives spreading from culture to culture to culture.
And what role do they have for us now, these pyramids?
In general, they reflect the idea of access points of information. For understand, you have the idea of crystalline matrices that are subterranean. And the idea is that these crystalline matrices contain, so to say, as physical anchor points, the idea of energetics that have been present and will be ever present throughout the idea of your Earth's existence. So you could look at them as energetic storage sites for the idea of your Earth's collective consciousness. The idea is information and energy from various points in space-time on your Earth's timeline are stored, so to say, are anchored, energetically speaking, within the idea of these crystalline structures. Now understand, these energies, these realities eternally exist, for they are aspects of creation, and that which exists will always exist. The idea is they are anchored into your space-time equation, your perspective of the here and now, through the idea of the crystalline matrices. That's your greatest access point, so to say, for these other realities, for these other times of Earth that are relevant to you. So in that sense, the crystals in that way of your planet then share and distribute this energy through what you consider to be the ley lines of your planet, the meridian lines, the channels of your planet, energetically speaking. These crystalline energies are distributed through these energetic pathways. And the idea is these different pathways, which weave throughout your planet, will converge at certain points. And it is at these convergence points where many of these pyramids are placed, thus allowing for this crystalline matrix within your Earth to, in that sense, be hyper-focused at the specific locations where the pyramids have been built, thus allowing for the pyramids to act as a database for your Earth's collective consciousness and history and timeline expression. So information from up or down line can be accessed from the pyramid. It also allows for individuals to utilize, through communion with the pyramid, that psychic electromagnetic current of energy we have described in a way that allows for them to travel deep, astrally speaking, within the earth. For there are extra-dimensional civilizations and spaces within your earth. It also allows for individuals to utilize the pyramid in the opposite way, to travel upwards, using that electromagnetic energy that converges at the pyramid as a form of stabilization, so they can then, in that sense, expand and extend from the pyramidal point, so to say, or the apex, upwards into the idea of other realities that are higher in frequency. These are some of the general, you could say, functions of pyramids.
Thank you. That is a very exciting explanation.
Yes, yes.
And do you know anything about that pyramid I mentioned, Teotihuacan? Who built it?
It relates, one moment. It relates to the idea of energies that you consider to be dragon energies. So in many ways, when one looks at the dragon symbolically, the dragon reflects the idea of consciousness that is able to expand upwards with great force and with great power. So in many ways, it acts as a location where individuals can draw upon the idea of very high frequency extra-dimensional energies, many of which are off-world, in a way that can allow for them to bridge those realities so they can, in that sense, channel those off-world energies very effectively. Understand that these very powerful off-world energies also, in that sense, have a reflective, so to say, energy that you understand as your kundalini energy of your earth. So in that sense, this structure relates to the idea of a upwards and downwards funneling of energies that you would call classically kundalini energies.
Okay. Powerful.
Yes, incredibly powerful.
All right. I'm going to share with you some questions from the audience.
All right.
There is Denise Zamora who asks, how could we break free from the ego?
By not needing to break free from the ego. Because understand, the ego is an aspect of your consciousness. It's the aspect of your consciousness that utilizes the story structure we have mentioned so you can make linear sense of your reality and not go insane. It's your box. Your ego is just your box. But when your box becomes too tight and becomes too limited and becomes too restricted, then you experience the idea of the negative ego. But if your box is, in that sense, expanding and is being updated by positive definitions, positive beliefs, positive stories, then you will have, in that sense, the experience of a positive ego, thus allowing for you to experience the idea of love, joy, and happiness in every moment of your life. And when you are that happy and satisfied and joyful, you will not really have any cares at all about putting down the ego, because you won't be experiencing the ego as, in that sense, as being something that is perceived as uncomfortable.
Sure.
Does that make some sense for you?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
It is part of this reality. Do
Yes.
you experience ego?
We experience ego in the sense of recognizing that we are all individuated beings. The ego allows for us to maintain a sense of individuality. Okay. However, we are not limited to that sense of individuality, for our ego, in that sense, is acutely aware of the idea that we are all linked, that we are all one energy. And our ego, in that sense, is able to experience both the idea of individuated consciousness and the idea of collective consciousness. And this is what all of you are, in that sense, moving towards. For if you truly had no ego, you would not be, in that sense, a physical being. For the ego perspective is relevant in realities that possess qualities of physicality. If you had no ego, you would be non-physical. So the ego, in that sense, is a tool. And it is a tool that can be used in a way that functions well and properly and helps you to build structures. or it can be, in that sense, a tool that does not function properly. It all depends, of course, upon how you use it. If you define it as a problem, if you define it as a distraction or as a hindrance or as something that is sabotaging you, then the idea is that you will experience the ego in such a way. But if you recognize that the ego in that sense represents your character, which is always changing, and that your ego in that sense is a side effect of your physical expression, in that sense is natural, then you will experience the ego in a much more positive way.
Sure. Thank you.
Yay.
Adriana Marroquin asks, what kind of consciousness does our sun have?
Well, generally speaking, solar consciousness, stellar consciousness, for it is a star. Now, in terms of how that consciousness operates, in many ways it acts similar to how we describe the convergence point for your pyramids. Understand that your stars in the sky are all a part of interconnected networks. Think of the stars as nodes, where different stellar and light-based channels of energy are converging. So the idea is your star, the sun, relates to the idea of a node in a network of other stars. And consciousness, so to say, and souls, linearly speaking, that are desiring incarnations upon your earth, travel, so to say, through that stellar network to the central node of your sun, thus allowing for them to, in that way, have a greater flavor and taste of your earth experience. And the idea is that they work with the different levels of the sun. You have the idea of your least dense level of it, your most moderate dense level, and then the idea of your physical density expression of your sun. And consciousness will work with these three levels, and the idea is that by the time they are at the densest level, that generally speaking aligns with the time, so to say, of incarnation. And this is one of the ways that your sun operates in relationship to the idea of consciousness expressing itself upon the earth.
So does sun gazing connect us with all these levels of consciousness from the sun?
It can, but it depends on the state of being that the sun gazer is in whilst they are sun gazing. But it can. It has that capacity, yes.
Okay. Jacinta Escamilla is asking, what is the purpose of incarnating here on Earth?
To experience. Now, we know that is very general, but that's because there are many types of experiences that can be had on Earth that are not able to be had in other physical reality expressions in quite the same way. For understand, your Earth, in that sense, has a great deal of energy that relates to transformation. So, when a consciousness incarnates on Earth, because your genetics within the bodies that you incarnate into, so to say, are linked to a multitude of other realities, including extraterrestrial, physical, and quasi-physical realities, you are able, as a soul, to experience many themes that are a part of other extraterrestrial and otherworldly expressions on Earth, which allows for you to rapidly integrate them, which allows for you to rapidly transform them. So your evolution, so to say, multiplies tenfold. It is a hyper-accelerated class of transformation. So instead of having to incarnate in a variety of different civilizations to have, so to say, themes and experiences, you can incarnate into the Earth experience in a way that allows for you to have, so to say, genetic connections to many worlds, so you can experience many of those themes simultaneously while you're on Earth, with the energy of transformation, the nature of your planet, fueling that exploration so you could rapidly integrate them, which again, as we have said, is simply the idea of applying your positive perspective, applying your positive action through your positive state of being. And it allows for you to rapidly grow, to rapidly evolve as a soul in a way that's not quite as accessible in other physical reality incarnational themes that are not of your Earth.
This is a very powerful school then.
Yes, yes. It is, in that sense, a master class, as it has been called by many.
And how do you benefit from us integrating all these experiences or negativity or densities? How do you
We experience ourselves evolving as a co-creative side effect, so to say, of our own evolution and exploration and your own evolution and exploration, because we are, in that sense, your descendants. We are, in that sense, created through the idea of experimentation project that has been done, that utilized and still does utilize the idea of your DNA. So as you make these changes within yourselves, as you integrate and transform within yourselves, that has a epigenetic effect in relationship to our DNA. Our DNA shifts and changes as all of you shift and change, and vice versa. It's a two-way communication street. So because we are genetically linked to you, because we are your descendants in that way, we are evolving with you. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
And one last question. We are almost getting to an hour, so this would be, why are we experiencing that time is accelerating so much?
Because time, in that sense, is a side effect of your own consciousness. And as you, in that sense, accelerate within your own consciousness, you will, in that sense, experience time accelerating as well.
And does this mean that that the reality also is more malleable?
Yes, precisely. For in that sense, when you are in an altered state, whether that be through a vision quest or through the idea of dreaming, you notice that time does not really add up in the same way it adds up in your physical reality. So in that sense, because you are noticing time in the physical reality is becoming more wiggly, more lucid, more expansive, more accelerated, it's as if you are experiencing time in the same way you would experience time if you were in some kind of altered state or if you were in some kind of dreaming experience, thus allowing for your relationship to physical reality to become more like a dream. And as it becomes more dreamlike for you, you can, in that sense, create the sensation of waking up in the dream, where you can then lucidly live your life and mold and sculpt reality in a way that is less limited than before you recognized you were dreaming whilst awake.
So people that are not in the same level of consciousness that have not awakened, if we could call it like that, they experience time different from the ones that are awakened?
Yes, generally speaking. Now, they may notice that there are some fluctuations that are occurring as a result of your collective acceleration, but in many ways, they will experience that acceleration in a way that is relevant to how they are organizing their consciousness. And generally speaking, the more limited their consciousness is, the more of an effect that will have on how they experience the idea of these time fluctuations. But many of them notice that time is, in that sense, becoming more wiggly, a little less linear in terms of how you're experiencing it. But for those of you that are not imposing the same types of limitation, you have access to that awareness, you have access to that energy in a much greater capacity than those whom are choosing to not vibrate as high.
Okay. Nice, Riok. It has been a pleasure to talk with you. I am very thankful. I send you much, much love, and I hope to hear from you soon.
Yes, yes. Our unconditional love to you and to your people as well. And we thank you so dearly for this co-creation. And we will speak with you again soon in the physical reality and in your dream. All right.
How are you, Tyler? It was amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm doing quite well. I'm just sort of coming back to it a little bit more. The trances are getting more and more deep each time I do them. But I love it. It's incredibly euphoric. And then afterwards, I have this like feeling of positive momentum that's generally with me, and it's very easy for me to do a lot of rapid transformation, because it's like after the session, I go really high into his vibration, and then it's kind of like I'm settling back into the physical reality. So anything here that's not like in total alignment with myself, I can then see with greater clarity, so I can really quickly transform a great deal, you know, afterwards.
So, do you remember what we all talked at this hour?
I remember like bullet points.
Okay.
Like bullet points. Yeah, if someone was like, "What did you talk about today?" It was like, "Well, we talked about pyramids." And then I can remember like certain things about the pyramids, or we talked about this. And it's sort of like a dream where I'll remember like a specific part of the dream, and maybe some of the things that took place at that part. But then there's like a lot of it that I like don't really remember until I meditate on it. If I meditate on it, more comes back. But afterwards, it's only like maybe 2 or 3 highlights will really be obvious to me.
Right. And as you are channeling, you as Tyler, where is your consciousness? I mean, is it like, what is it doing, or is it?
So that's a good question. So I keep my consciousness in my body. So I'm like essentially meditating on my energy centers, and I'm just breathing. I'm just breathing. I'm meditating on the centers. I'm smiling with love and joy to my heart. I'm just doing what I can to stay in this, you know, loving, open state. And I will localize my consciousness into parts of my body to help keep that center very open and active, so the information can keep flowing.
Great. Well, it has been really fun. I mean, I'm very thankful. I hope to have this interview out very soon. I have to translate it to Spanish and subtitle it.
Wow.
And
Wow.
but I'll let you know. And well, we were gonna have tomorrow our private session, so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. That'll be great. I'm super excited to have that session with you. And thanks for doing this interview with me today. It was really fun, and I thoroughly loved your questions. It was very, very amazing.
Oh, thank you, Tyler, very, very much. Sending you much, much love, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Awesome. Much love to you, and much love to your awesome baby that's on the way. It's so exciting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're super welcome. Well, have a great day, and we will talk soon.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.